welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Today's video is in honor of the Every Bit Counts challenge put on by Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead. If you have not checked out her channel, I highly recommend it. She's precious. She is a wealth of knowledge, and every August she does an Every Bit Counts challenge where she challenges anyone who wants to participate to show and film just all the little bits of things that are coming in from the garden that we are preserving throughout the summer. Now, I have a tendency to do like all of our huge big preservation projects for each categorized fruit or vegetable in one video. And that's the series that we've kind of been doing lately. We still have our preserving peppers massive day. We have our preserving tomatoes massive day video coming out. But in honor of the Every Bit Counts challenge, I wanted to do a video kind of montage of all the different little projects that I am doing on a daily and weekly basis to keep up with everything that's coming in from the garden. And for the most part, that is going to be peppers, herbs, basil, like lime basil, much of my tea herbs. I'm doing a lot of freezer clean out to get more space for the tomatoes. I'm freezing tomatoes. So this video, I'm gonna be showing you all the different projects that I'm doing on a daily and weekly basis. And it's just gonna be, we're gonna be canning up some venison. I'm gonna be dehydrating some herbs, and we're just gonna kind of bring you along as we go through this Every Bit Counts and getting everything coming in from the garden onto the shelves or into the freezer. Okay, I hope y'all enjoy, and let's get started. Welcome to Food Prep Guide. My name is Jordan. I'm a homeschooling mom to three, living on 3 beautiful acres with my wonderful husband. A health crisis forced our family to change the way we think about food. Unfortunately, it also put us in financial hardship. Thankfully, the solution to both challenges was the same: to live off the land as much as possible. For us, that means growing a garden, preserving the harvest, raising chickens, and cooking from scratch. It's definitely a family affair. And friends too. Meet Stacy, researcher, author, and lifelong learner. She entered the world of food preservation in the crazy days of 2020. She joined a gleaning co-op, and a local grocer offered her clearance produce in bulk. And so the adventure began. Together, we're reclaiming the old ways of food stewardship and teaching them to the next generation. If there's one thing you should know about us, it's that we love Jesus and seek to steward his blessings wisely. Our table always has room for one more, so y'all come join us. One of the items we have coming in abundance is peppers, all different colors and varieties, and I am basically just chopping those, de-seeding those, and freeze drying them as they come in. But as we get further into the season, I'm stopped doing this, and I'm going to be just saving up my crates for all the other pepper projects that we will be doing soon. And Lord willing, we will be doing a how to preserve peppers 5 ways video coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. But once I freeze dry them, I just put them in quart jars and go ahead and vacuum seal them. You saw me mixing them all in this big bowl, and that's because I like to have lots of different colors in one single jar, because I generally use these in our like Taco Tuesday nights when we do either tacos or quesadillas or enchiladas or just whatever. And when they're thrown into casseroles, I just really like to have that multicolored variety. So that's why I mix them all in that bowl first. But once I get the jars filled, I will vacuum seal them. Now, you can vacuum seal multiple different ways, but with freeze-dried foods, you do need an oxygen-free environment to keep them at their peak. So vacuum sealing is kind of a must with freeze-dried foods, whereas with dehydrated foods, you could get away with not doing it. You can see here I'm using my electric vacuum sealer, which is really handy when I have many jars to do at one time, which is usually the case when I'm unloading the freeze dryer. I will have that linked in the description box below, but I also really love my brake bleeder pump. Y'all have seen me use that multiple times. It's manual, doesn't need any electricity, no batteries, no charging, which is what I love about it. It's also really nice and shallow and slides into my kitchen drawer easily, so I don't have to haul out my huge vacuum sealer machine, but you can also use a vacuum sealer machine. You just need to have that mason jar attachment, and I'll have those linked in the description box below. The next thing we have coming in is basil. I mean, I cannot keep up with the basil this year. I made the mistake of planting way too many plants, and that's because last year we ran out of pesto pretty quickly in the season, so I thought to remedy that, I'll just double the amount of pesto that I was growing. But I think that was a mistake too, because I have 6 bushes that are about 3 feet tall, and I am not able to keep up with it. So I'm dehydrating some, I'm freeze drying some, I am using them fresh in our just eating, like our lunches. They're really nice on toast with some mozzarella and sliced tomatoes from the garden. Of course, caprese salad or a caprese sandwich melt is good too. But for the most part, I'd say the bulk of our basil is being used for pesto, which is what I'm going to be showing in this video. As soon as I get it from the garden, I just run it through my salad spinner and get it nice and clean, because sometimes there are some bugs on there, as well as some dirt and debris. But then I just go through and use my food processor and toss all the ingredients in there, give it a whirl, and the pesto is done. Now, we have a whole video dedicated to pesto making and how to keep your basil leaves a nice, vibrant green color, as opposed to them turning extremely dark green and almost actually browning while in your freezer or in your refrigerator. So I will link that video in the description box below for how you can keep that pesto nice and bright green. The other thing that I would note is, I think in that video that I will link, I use pine nuts, which is your typical ingredient for a basil-based pesto, but I have since switched to using pumpkin seeds because pine nuts have just gone through the roof as far as cost goes, and I just don't want to spend that much on pesto. And the pumpkin seeds have turned out really, really well. I put them in half-pint jars and store them in the freezer, and I'm basically doing a batch every couple weeks. Now, this next video is not coming from the garden, obviously. It is meat, but we are running out of freezer space very quickly. During the summer, our freezers mostly act as a holding ground for the tomatoes that come in while I'm waiting for like a big canning day. And I have been slowly going through our venison. This is the venison that we hunted on our property, and I have been trying to work through it as quickly as possible, but the tomatoes are taking over and I need to work quicker. So today we canned up some of our cubed venison, and we use this in stew meat. We have just recently started using it as our taco filling, because when you pressure can venison, it falls apart and it tastes very similar to pulled pork with just a little bit more of a beefy flavor. Now, venison is notorious for having a gamey taste, but the reason why I say beefy flavor is because of how we season it, and I'll show you that in just a second. But canning venison could not be easier, especially when you're doing it raw. You just chop up the raw chunks, put them in your jars, give yourself 1-inch headspace, put in whatever seasonings you want, debubble, lids and rings, and you're good to go. The seasoning that we use, you can certainly just do salt, but I highly recommend this beef broth seasoning mix. It is my secret to making deer taste more like beef and to get that gamey taste out of it. I have been doing this for years, and I felt like we used to waste a lot of our deer meat because the family just really didn't love it. Like, it's a great free source of meat here on the property, but at the same time, just because it's free, if it doesn't get eaten, it is still not worth doing. So I spent a lot of time testing out different flavorings and seasonings and trying to really nail the taste of the venison to where the whole family, including 3 young children who can be a little bit picky sometimes, would eat it. And this beef broth powder answered that for us, and we have not had any issues eating it since then. In fact, we run out just about every year a few weeks before hunting season starts. So we need about 3 deer to get us through the season and not run out. And this is the 3rd deer that I'm still having to process. So anyway, long story short, once we got all of our jars filled, it's just clean, or new lids, clean rings onto fingertip tight, and into the pressure canner they go. I'm going to be using my Presto digital pressure canner because I have a glass stovetop and I'm a little bit nervous about having a super heavy loaded pressure canner on it. But this deer meat needs to pressure can for 75 minutes. Now that's at 1,000 feet or below elevation. If you are above 1,000 feet, you will want to check out how much time you'll need to add to your venison. And then just to note, what the steps that you just saw, this is for all raw meat. Raw chicken, raw beef, raw pork. It's not just venison that's canned this way. If you are canning raw meat in cubes or just chunks, you can do it this way. Notice I didn't add any water, and that's because raw meat forms its own liquid, which you will see in just a minute when I pull these jars out. It forms its own liquid all the way up to 1 inch headspace, as you can see here. So we do not add any water to that. And these will go on the shelf and clear out the freezer for those tomatoes. The next thing that I'm doing on pretty much a weekly basis is harvesting herbs. These are mostly our tea herbs. And this right here is our lime basil. I cannot stay on top of this. I planted 2 milk jugs this year with the lime basil. We do a winter sowing method, which is we sow our seeds in milk jugs. And I did 2 of them this year thinking maybe it'll be enough. But it turned out that it is way too much. I have already dried 2 to 3 quart jars worth of this lime basil. And to make tea, you know, you really only need like 1 tablespoon of crushed leaves to make tea, so that is a lot. But I'm basically just trying to keep this trimmed back, keep it tamed. As soon as I bring it in from the garden, I will run it through my salad spinner. I love this thing. Get it clean, get all the buggies off, and then onto the trays they go. Depending on what appliance I have not running at the moment, I will either dehydrate these or freeze dry these. Now, I do prefer to freeze dry herbs now that I have a freeze dryer because the quality is just uncomparable. It is the flavor, the aroma is just preserved so much better with a freeze dryer. But I used a regular dehydrator for years, and if my freeze dryer is in use, I will still use a regular dehydrator to take care of these. After that, I will just vacuum seal them in mason jars. Okay, last but not least, every single week, actually every few days, I am freezing tomatoes. Now this is just until I can get enough to go into the freezer, to get enough for a big canning day. But to prep the tomatoes for the freezer, I just core them, I peel off, or take out any yucky spots, any bite marks that have bruising on them, and then put them on freezer trays and into the freezer to flash freeze them, and then into bags they go. Now we do have a whole separate video on this process, and I kind of slow down and I take you through all the steps of freezing tomatoes, and in that video I also kind of give you an idea of my workflow for freezing tomatoes and canning tomatoes. That will be linked in the description box as well. See y'all next time. Bye!